Hey everyone, Dr. Luke here, the Twinflame Doctor. In today's episode, we're going to talk about exactly how and why your twin flame is your mirror. And to really understand this concept, you have to understand a couple of things. We have to understand different dimensions, we have to understand the mirror, we have to understand duality, and we have to understand consciousness. Let alone, we have to understand the ego and everything within our own ego that keeps us from actually reaching that inner union so we can eventually meet that outer union with our twin. So let's jump right into it. So first, what we have to understand though is we can't see our twin as something separate. That while we are energetically entwined and spiritually connected, that we have to understand that you are always one. And it's a separation of mind that you see another as separate from yourself, that you can never create that whole unity within yourself. So within my program, you have to understand that it takes two wholes to create a couple. And that's what we have to understand with our twin flame. They're our exact mirror, but we still have to understand though that we are still two human beings having the same experience. Even if we are the same soul, we have to overcome our inner shadows to try to live as one cohesive being. And the way that we have to do that is we have to transmute what's called duality. And what duality is, we have to understand that everything's a positive or negative. Everything in this universe has a positive or negative reaction depending on the initial input. So for example, a positive input, eventually somewhere in the universe there's going to be an equal negative output. And the goal really within the twin flame relationship is to understand that you have to have the inner unit and create that balance within. You try to minimize those drastic swings, whether it's the egoic breakdown or those constant confrontations. So the best way I like to understand this is using two tetrahedrons to understand that your twin flame is an exact mirror, but they're an exact mirror of exactly what you need to learn and heal within your own being. So again, if we look at this from a perspective of tetrahedron, is if you are the black tetrahedron and your twin flame is the blue tetrahedron, what you have to understand then is that each of you have your strengths and each of you have your weaknesses. And that together you can create the I am, or what we could think of, us as a couple. But what we fail to understand really when it comes to duality is understanding that we are psychologically attracted to those that have the same psychological wounds, but also embody our weaknesses. Meaning their strengths are our weaknesses. So it's that when you come together, you create this cohesive unit. But at the same time, this is where our ego takes over. And because we're so conditioned to stand up for ourselves or to set boundaries, and the real issue isn't so much to have standards or to set boundaries, it's that we don't know how to appropriately set those standards or set those boundaries. So that's when the breakdown really starts to happen. Because within society, we're taught that we're supposed to do things a certain way in a specific order, in which everyone does something different, everyone does everything different. So it's understanding that within our twin flame relationship is we also start to create with judgment and expectations that we want them to do things exactly like ourselves. And for any of you who's ever been in, let's say, a soulmate relationship, it's not that they aren't fun and they aren't cohesive, but the depth of them aren't really there. And they actually embody more of your similarities, and you do a lot of things more similar rather than being complementary to you as a couple. And honestly, it's unrealistic for us to expect ourselves to hold this Zen state or this inner peace all the time. So what we really have to understand is we have to figure out the balance or the trauma or the wounds within ourselves that really helps us keep us from being triggered and ultimately hurting each other instead of starting to heal our individual selves within. It's once we start to embody, our twin strengths to help overcome our weaknesses that we can then become whole. And it's the same thing for your twin. They also have to embody those same opposites. So meaning your strengths are also the same weakness as their weakness that they need to embody and grow in themselves. But again, it's the way that we do this and the process of how we do it that we get wrong. Because it's once that we can fully do this within ourselves, we could create this, middle point or the one point as it's called. And that's where it's called that inner union. And that's really where that self-love and that self-acceptance really comes in. But in order for that to actually happen, we have to deal with a lot of these societal wounds and the societal expectations that we have been putting on our relationships. So what we have to understand is that time and space are a human construct. And they're part of the fourth and fifth dimension. That it's on this sixth dimension or this sixth plane of consciousness that ultimately you want to see we see our twin as the reflection or the mirror of us. So ultimately what you're starting to see within your twin or being mirrored back to you are the same qualities that you need to embody within yourself. But again, it's the how that we do this. And that ultimately starts with the self-awareness within ourselves. Because it takes the self-awareness to be recognizing our own traumas, our own weaknesses, and our own strengths to also create a whole me first. And if you're watching this video, I can bet with almost probably 99% certainty, you're probably the divine feminine. And again, don't get caught up on the femininity, masculine. They're all just energies. I was divine feminine. And it really took me embodying more masculine qualities of setting proper boundaries, setting proper expectations, and learning how to communicate through them. And understanding what's the difference between a boundary and the difference between narcissism and manipulation. So once you start to understand this basic construct of the sixth dimension being mirrored back, or your twin flame mirroring back qualities that you need to embody, it really takes us breaking down what is it that they're specifically doing that I need to embody with myself. Is it the strength to, set boundaries, to have expectations, to stand up for myself? And again, it's not to say that they're doing it properly or the way they're doing it isn't going to be painful and hurtful to you. But it's taking that broader spectrum and taking that, consciousness and taking that zoom out look to really start to focus on, let's say, the forest as a whole and not focusing just on this one tree. What am I supposed to learn from this situation? And instead of constantly asking, what did this happen to me? Start to ask, what has this happened for me? In order to properly understand how this works is we have to understand, again, duality. It's that positive, negative. That duality is purely based on judgment and expectation. That when we have judgment and expectation, we are setting as something separate than us. So if I say one day I'll be abundant, I'm obviously putting that separation between me and that abundance, creating that polarity or that duality within mind. So in order to properly collapse that, we have to become what it is we already want. So that's what we call our becoming self. Because again, it's once we start to get these judgment of others, these expectations of others, that ultimately we're letting ourselves down. That's really when we're able to take this zoomed out look and really remove duality, that we're able to start to look at everything as a more cohesive interaction and stop all the judgment and release all these expectations that we have on others. That really the only expectation and judgment, I don't want to say judgment, but the expectations we should really need to have is on our own growth. What can I do to be 1% better today? Or even 0.1% better today? Because eventually it's going to have, that snowball effect. Or like some of you might have heard of the Fibonacci sequence. And that's where everything happens, like the snowball effect. So you have one action, and then the next one's another one. And 1 plus 1 is 2. And then you add 2 plus 1, so it's the previous number plus the current number to create the next number. So 2 plus 1 would be 3, and then 3 plus 2 would be 5. That's what they ultimately call the snowball effect. It's creating that energetic movement and alignment into your true purpose and into your true heart center. And this is what we really focus on within my relationship restoration program, is we really break down your human design, your gene keys, to really help you overcome and identify what are these shadows and what is it your divine gift that you're truly being given to overcome here. So I know I misspoke. I meant to overcome the shadow, not to overcome your gift. So, and we do this in all realms. We do it in the realms of prosperity. We do it in the realms of love. We go through your activation sequence. And we also go through what's called your pearl sequence, which is your pearl sequence is also when you've embodied all the other gene keys that you can really start to activate your greatest gift or your true purpose for living here in life. So not only do we break down yours, we really give you the tools to be able to break down and understand your twin flame. Because again, the idea is that not to focus on them, but to create that empathy for them, understanding that they're going through the same struggles that we've also gone through, just on the opposite side. Because again, what usually happens is there's that imbalance within the relationship. That what happens is usually when one decides to leave, or the runner, all of a sudden the power imbalance, flips. You could say the masculine becomes the feminine and so forth. So like for my example, I was the masculine. I was a little over controlling, judgmental, and I like to say I was an arrogant, pompous, what. Well, when she left and finally embodied her masculinity by demanding a better person and someone to emotionally be there for her, it sent me into my feminine side. And it kept me searching and searching and searching. What was it that I needed to embody, and what was it that I needed to learn within my soul? And ultimately, mine was the inner love and the inner union, which we all have. But again, we all have our own separate path on how to get there and unlock the union. That unlike all these other twin flame programs and these other twin flame courses, and these twin flame videos is, again, you each have your own human design, your own genetic code wired within you. And I specifically help you walk through that one by one. What is it you need to embody? I give you the breakdown of what is your say, what do you need to overcome, and how can you truly embody your pearl essence? And then not only do we go through that, I also give you the tools to, start to heal those inner wounds and those inner trauma. With my 5 step-by-step process that is based in psychology, spiritualism, ancient wisdom and civilization, it's based in it all. I didn't leave any stone unturned. So if you'd like to join now or schedule a free consultation from our relationship restoration program, please click the link below. And the other thing we really have to understand is consciousness, and understand that we are all part of one greater plan, or the all interaction, or the one God. And whatever God you follow, that is each your own right. But again, on the true path is understanding that you are your own conscious creator, that you are your own manifester, that you can manifest your own destiny. So it's to understand that consciousness is really everything entangled with us. So like the quantum physics, so the quantum entanglement. So quantum entanglement is the perfect example of how to explain you and your twin flame mirroring things back. Or even if you're on that same wavelength, then it's not necessarily a mirror. You can think of it more of as like a radio station, to where they're both on the same frequency nonstop. And it's when you're on that same frequency that the same messages can come across. So for instance, with mine, I would think something and she'd text me it word for word verbatim. And this was before I even had my spiritual awakening, and it was quite scary. I didn't understand it. So it took me understanding quantum entanglement that was founded by Einstein in 1934 with two other scientists. It's one atom here on Earth and another atom out here in space. We're both spinning in the same direction. And as the one here on Earth switched directions, the one in space instantly switched directions as well, with no pause and no leg. That's how we can almost guarantee you and your twin flame healing, because it's not going to be easy, but it's understanding that energetic resonance and that connection that as you grow, they're forced to grow. It's not an option because of that quantum entanglement part again. And it's going to be extremely hard because they're going to be resistant. And especially if they're not the one that has necessarily stumbled upon or found their spiritual aspect to help them understand the greater whole, they're really going to be resistant and not understand what it is. And this is where they're going to go in the ego mind. And it's the ego where it really means for edging greatness out. That really it's ego that we have this judgment, we have these expectations. And the ego is really what sets us up for failure. So again, if we bring this back to consciousness, it's absolutely vital that we break this energetic, tether to our twin. Because it's not that you aren't one or you aren't always tethered. It's the understanding that you each have to grow as your own individual. That we need to see separation as preparation. Let me say that again. Separation is preparation for your reunion. Because ultimately there was something stifling the growth of each soul within that relationship that sometimes we have to learn these apart. And most oftentimes, that's where the most growth happens. It's like the rubber band analogy. Without constant tension on the rubber band, it would never slingshot forward. So it's the same aspect as soon as you slingshot forward and you think that you found it or you found an answer, there goes that tension. It starts growing. That's the growth. It's the evolution. It's nonstop. That again, we have to really break down this ego and we have to remove that subconscious or consciousness tether that we have to our twin flame. Because also what we need to understand though too that science tells us is when you have a coherent heart and a coherent brain, a coherent heart can magnetize something in 3 to 6 feet. Meaning when you are living from the heart space, not being egoic, and you're not judgmental, and you're truly just being and accepting life as it is around you, it has a energetic resonance that can be measured 3 to 6 feet. So 3 the minimum, up to 6 feet. The brain, when it's coherent, an inch. It's 1 inch. We can measure it. I mean, when you're not stressed and you're in that same state of being. Typically, you're going to have, if you have a coherent heart, you're going to have a coherent brain. They're typically one of the same. Because it's when we separate the brain and the heart that we go into the logical or the overly emotional. When they are absolutely coherent, we can properly use the brain, what it's for, and that as an aid, as a tool to truly assist our emotions. Because again, the essence of everything within this universe is love. That is what everything's built off of. That's why everything centers around the heart, and why a heart is the center and the most powerful energetic source within your body. And again, the only way to really get a coherent brain and a coherent heart is to break down these walls, break down these traumas, break down these judgments and these labels that you continuously put on yourself and on your twin flame. So if you'd like more help on this journey, please join my free masterclass, or if you're ready, sign up for a consultation today. I'll leave a link in the description below for both of these. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you in the next one.